Hello, I am Daisy, your hostess, and in this video we continue on to the next chapter from the book titled Self-Development, A Handbook for the Ambitious by Addington Bruce. It is in the public domain. If you're new to my channel, welcome, and to our subscribers, welcome back. We're going to go right into this next chapter. It is titled Psychic Contagion. In its simplest form, psychic contagion is seen in the tendency to yawn when one glimpses another person yawning. It also is in evidence in the almost equally prevalent tendency to cough when in church, at the theater, or in some other place of public resort, another person is heard coughing. What this means is that human beings tend to imitate one another. To say this is only another way of saying that they are suggestible. And they are suggestible with regard not merely to trivialities like yawning or coughing, but with regard also to behavior in general. It is in this that makes psychic contagion so influential in affecting success and failure in life. Let a man habitually associate with worthwhile people, with people of high ideals and lofty endeavor, and he is almost certain to become a worthwhile person himself. But let his intimates be an inferior sort, and in time he, too, will degenerate. He will unconsciously make their ways of thinking his. He will unconsciously glide into their miserable ways of doing. As one psychologist explains the matter, quote, "When all with whom we associate think in a certain way, they exert a tremendous force upon us to draw us into the same outlook. By their looks of approval or disapproval, by their suggestions or by their arguments, they coax, bump, pull, and twist our apperception mass until at length it settles into such equilibrium as in harmony with theirs. And then, of course, since one's mental attitude is so large a factor in determining what one shall find, we see as they do." End quote. Footnote: C.C. Peters, Human Conduct. End footnote. Nor are members essential to the destructive workings of psychic contagion. Prolonged intimacy with a single individual of undesirable traits may mean a full blooming of those traits in oneself. This is especially likely to be the case if the individual in question has any marked admiration compelling characteristics such as wit, brilliancy of mind, energy, etc. For admiration, however reluctant, tends peculiarly to beget imitation. Mostly people take as their models not merely those with whom they are most intimate, but more particularly those who captivate their imagination, which is why, to be more specific, people of a distinctly cynical turn of mind are extremely dangerous associates for anybody who desires to retain a wholesome view of life, to keep faith in mankind, and to have enduring peace of mind. The cynics often are bright, clever, really entertaining people. Nevertheless, they always are poisonous people. The cynic, to reproduce a finely drawn portrait of this deplorable human type, finds his unholy happiness in laying his tarnishing hands upon the conceptions of virtue, goodness, idealism, the soul and its aspirations, the heart and its purest loves, the mind in its struggle for truth. These and all grace and trust and beauty are cynicism's victims. Withal, the cynic may fashion his barbs so wittily that, even while condemning the malice and bitterness he shows, one is forced to a grudging admiration. Herein lies the special danger of consorting with a cynical friend. Little by little, the falseness and viciousness of his philosophy will drop from sight. All unconsciously, if very gradually, one will slip into the habit of echoing his miserable sentiments. It is then only a slight step to imputing unworthy motives to people in general, to seeing some ulterior purpose in every generous or unselfish act. Psychic contagion will then have completely wrought its fatal transformation. One cynic will have created another. Consequently, Those who crave success cannot be too cautious in their choice of intimates. Playing with fire is a dangerous thing, as everybody knows. The man who deliberately and persistently consorts with people dominated by perverse or debilitating ideas need not hope to escape being burned. There is another and very different way in which psychic contagion operates to hamper a man in his struggle for success. Of this I was not long ago reminded when a businessman of my acquaintance, the head of a small brokerage firm, complained to me of the incompetency of his office staff. "It seems to me," he concluded bitterly, "that I have in my office the worst set of ignoramuses in the street. All day they have been making mistakes, and all day they have been sulking and growling. This has been going on for nearly a week, and I can't stand it much longer. Yet I don't see how I could replace them. Poor as they are, they know my business as no newcomers could." In reality, he had a most competent staff. He knew it, and I knew it, and I could plainly see that he was puzzled to account for the situation that had developed in his office. I therefore asked him, "How about yourself all week? Have you been growling as well as they? Were you by any chance the first to growl?" Before he could reply, I went on, "Try to recall exactly the events of the day when their irritability first impressed itself on you. You will find, I think, that you started that day in a bad temper yourself. You probably pitched into the office boy, scolded the stenographer, and perhaps found fault unnecessarily with your bookkeeper. You will also find, in all likelihood, that you have nursed your grouch pretty steadily ever since. If so, you may depend on it that you have infected your staff with your grouchiness. The sooner you begin smiling again, the sooner things will go smoothly with your staff also." My friend was silent for a few moments. "I don't know but what you're right," he then admitted. "Business hasn't been altogether brisk, and I may have been a little short-tempered. I guess I'd better get a grip on myself and give my staff the sunshine medicine you recommend." And in fact, that familiar saying, "like begets like," is of far wider application than many people suspect. True in the physical realm, it is equally true in the realm of the mind and the spirit. One might say that it amounts to a mental and spiritual law, the operation of which has much to do with a man's success or failure. Many a man of inferior natural talent has achieved a real success simply because, consciously or unconsciously, he has so ordered his life that the law of like begetting like has operated in his favor. In all his undertakings, he has kept a serene confidence in the good will and sincerity of his fellow men. He has diligently tried to be of use to other people. He has made kindness and courtesy his watchwords. This trustful, helpful attitude has engendered a similar attitude in those with whom he has been thrown much in contact. As he believes in them, so they believe in him, and if need be, they will go out of their way to be of service to him. On the opposite, the man who cultivates a mistrustful, suspicious attitude toward his fellows reaps a harvest of suspicion and mistrust on their part. They do not willingly help him. Instead of boosting, they are inclined to knock. At all events, the weight of their influence and patronage is thrown in favor of some other man. As I write, there comes into mind the sad history of a personal acquaintance. Belonging to an old Boston family and a graduate of Harvard College, this man started business life with social connections that ordinarily would have meant much to him. But even while in college, he had begun to look at life morosely. He had dabbled in pessimistic literature and had been abnormally impressed by human defects and frailties. The consequence was that he began business with an almost complete lack of faith in other people. A cold, calculating selfishness was his dominant trait. This same selfishness he attributed to everybody else. And he undoubtedly has found most people selfish where he has been concerned. Even friends who would naturally be inclined to help him have gradually become antagonistic. Today, he is a bitter, lonely, disappointed man. He has been a dismal failure in business, trying his hand at many things. He has succeeded in none of them. Cast about among your own acquaintances who have not prospered. Analyze their life histories, and I am sure you will find many indications that they too are victims of the law that like begets like. They may be men of brilliant parts, but they have cultivated mental states that have reacted to their disadvantage by the impressions made on the minds of others. Turn from acquaintances to yourself. See if you cannot find illustrated in your own person, for good or for harm, the workings of the law in question. Whether or no you succeed in recognizing its applicability to yourself, rest assured that you, like all men, are within its scope. If then, on self-examination, you do find in your mental and moral makeup any traits which you know to be defects, try to overcome them, not simply because they are defects, but also because they must inevitably create in other people moods detrimental to you. End of chapter. Okay, stay right here. Hit that like button, subscribe to the channel, leave me a comment. What's your feedback so far on Psychic Contagion? And I'm going to move right through to the next chapter, titled Moods and Their Control. If it is important, as suggested in the closing lines of the preceding chapter, to avoid creating adverse moods in other people, it is of course no less important to keep a watchful eye on one's own moods. For one's moods may have a decisive bearing on one's success in life, and moods of a most unfavorable sort may spring from seemingly most insignificant sources, as is well illustrated by an amusing little incident from real life told by Dr. George Herbert Betts. Many, many years ago, in stagecoach and saddle horse days, a clergyman undertook religious work in a rural district. After a long and wearisome ride to his new charge, he was hospitably entertained in a farmhouse, and before going to bed noted in his diary, quote, "Had a bountiful supper of cold pork, warm bread, bacon and eggs, coffee and rich pastry. I go to rest feeling that my witness is clear. The future is bright. I feel called to great and glorious work in this place. Brother Brown's family are godly people." End quote. Unhappily, as every modern hygienist knows, it is never wise to eat heartily when fatigued. The poor clergyman did not sleep well. He was troubled by unpleasant dreams, and next day behold him recording, quote, "I am very depressed in soul. The way looks dark. Far from being called to work among this people, I am beginning to doubt the safety of my own soul. I am afraid the desires of Brother Brown and his family are too much on carnal things." End quote. You are inclined to smile, I fancy, at the absurdity of this worthy clergyman allowing a pessimistic mood, born of indigestion, to color his judgment morbidly. Have you never been guilty of similar absurdity yourself? Reflect on the factors that determine your own judgments of men and things. I am sure you will find that again and again you have been led astray by the subtle influence exercised by moods on the reasoning power. Especially will you find that moods of depression, arising from whatever cause, make you a harsh, even an unjust judge. When possessed by such moods, you unconsciously exaggerate the defects of friends and acquaintances. Their good points become dimmed, their weaknesses magnified. You may even tend to attribute to them unworthy motives for behavior which you have to admit is praiseworthy. Next day, the pessimistic mood having passed, your judgment becomes more favorable to them. You perhaps wonder at yourself for having been so swift and stern in condemnation. But in the meantime, you have said or done things tending, it may be, to lifelong estrangement. You have made them miserable and yourself miserable because you did not reckon with the possibility of having your judgment biased by the mood of the day. So, in regard to matters in general, has it not often happened that, reading a book in a certain mood, you have found it dull and unprofitable, but taking it up later have formed a more favorable judgment of it? Operas, plays, the sermons and speeches you hear, have you not had reason to suspect over and over that moods affect your opinions of all things? Consequently, you must agree that to make due allowance for the influence of moods on the judgment is the bounden duty of all of us, and still more, that we should strive to prevent the development of depressive moods, making for a veritable poisoning of the mind. Such prevention is indeed possible, if it be true, and it undoubtedly is true, that we are largely the slaves of our moods. It is no less true that we largely have it in our power to shape the moods that dominate us. Certainly, for instance, we can avoid falling into the psychological error of the worthy old frontier clergyman of Dr. Bett's story. And, in fact, it may be set down as certain that some people are chronically in a depressed mood simply because they persistently eat too much or eat the wrong kinds of food. Lack of exercise is another common cause of moods of depression. After a few days of physical inactivity, a man suddenly discovers to his surprise that life holds little joy for him. A brisk walk be all he needs to dispel the clouds from his moral sky. Other people suffer from chronic or recurrent moods of depression and irritability because they do not give themselves enough fresh air when indoors. Their unpleasant mental state is really a symptom of brain weakness due to absence of oxygen. Let them keep their houses and workplaces properly ventilated, and their moods will speedily become less funereal and less explosive. In short, the more one complies with the laws of personal hygiene, the less will be the liability to moods that handicap. Which leads me to add, in passing, that the familiar phenomenon of so-called Blue Mondays is invariably a direct product of either deliberate or unwitting violation of these laws. So common is the Blue Monday condition of dullness, depression, and inefficiency that employers of labor sometimes heartily wish there were no break in the week's work, such as is brought by the Sunday holiday. In this they are in error, for it has been proved by experiment that no man can work continuously 7 days in the week and keep on doing good work. Nature unites with religion in insisting on cessation of work 1 day in every 7. The trouble with those afflicted with Blue Mondays is, therefore, not that they have had a holiday, but they have used it unwisely. Many of them, to begin with, make the mistake of sleeping far into Sunday morning. If a man's work all week has been unusually exhausting, an hour or so of extra sleep Sunday morning may indeed be needed. But many late sleepers do not really need the amount of sleep in which they indulge. When a man takes more sleep than is really necessary, there is an unfavorable effect on his organism. As that authority on sleep, Marie de Mancini, puts it, quote, "If one sleeps longer than the repose of consciousness and the repair of the tissues require, there will, in the first place, be an enfeeblement of consciousness from lack of exercise, and in the second place, there will be an adaptation of the vessels to an abnormal state of the nutritive circulation to the detriment of the functional circulation." End quote. This would not matter so much if, after rising, the Sunday late sleeper bestirred himself vigorously, but the reverse is usually the case. He dresses slowly and sits around idly until dinner time. Possibly he amuses himself glancing through, though not really reading, the newspaper. Then at 1 or 2 o'clock he eats an unusually heavy meal. The chances are he will follow this by an afternoon nap, prolonged until 4 or 5 o'clock, after which he puts more food into an already overloaded stomach. Such a program, through causing digestive disturbance, is bound to produce bad feelings next day. Its effect is intensified by the total, or almost total, failure to take either mental or physical exercise. With the blood circulation slowed down and the blood itself laden with the toxic products of indigestion, the mind suffers in common with the general physical system. When, on the contrary, a man rises Sunday at about his usual time, goes to church, thereby deriving mental as well as spiritual benefit through being stimulated to do some serious thinking, eats moderately, and passes his Sunday afternoon in pleasurable, preferably outdoor occupation, when he does all this and then goes to bed at a reasonable hour, he need have no fear of experiencing a Blue Monday. It is all a question of how the Sunday is spent. Dissipation, gorging, idleness are devils to be avoided on Sunday as on every other day in the week. Returning now to the general problem of mood control, mention should be made of the importance of not only paying due heed to the requirements of physical hygiene, but also of surrounding oneself, so far as possible, with a truly artistic home environment. For it may be set down as an established fact that in proportion as the home is decorated and furnished according to art principles, the greater will be the likelihood of those in it being unusually joyous and cheerful in mood. Whereas an artistically furnished home may be a contributing, even a direct cause, of moods the reverse of cheerful, and still worse, of deplorable character defects and outright ill health. For this reason, everything a person sees suggests ideas of some sort to him, and the suggestive potency of what he sees increases in proportion as the seeing occurs repeatedly early in the day and the last thing at night. Hence the peculiar significance of home surroundings as mood developers. Hence, too, the importance, when furnishing and decorating the home in general, of paying special attention to the furnishing and decorating of the bedroom. For obviously the things in the bedroom are things on which every day a person gaze rest first and last in his waking moments. If care be taken to make the bedroom particularly bright, attractive, and cheerful, it will unfailingly tend to create in the mind of its occupant a hopeful, confident attitude to life. If, on the opposite, the bedroom looks cheerless, its creative tendency will be in the direction of depressed, discouraged, pessimistic moods. But the mistake must not be made of confounding attractiveness with gaudiness of decoration or quantity of furniture and ornament. Observation has shown that the psychic influence of a bedroom papered in too bright colors or crowded with furniture and bric-a-brac is always disturbing and nerve-straining. Such a room creates feelings of unrest and discontent. It may even be a factor in causing nervous breakdowns. I know of a case in which a wealthy woman, for years a nervous invalid, was vastly improved in health when the bedroom and sitting room in which she spent most of her time were rearranged by a decorator who had psychological insight. He persuaded her to get rid of the massive furniture, the heavy ornamentation, the too abundant vases, mirrors, etc. In their stead, he put light furniture of simple design. Ornament he limited to a few green draperies and well-chosen pictures. Wallpaper of quiet hue and without pattern of any sort replaced the overpowering red paper that had been on the walls. That is to say, he decorated and arranged these rooms with the special purpose of making them truly cheerful and restful in their psychic influence, which is what you ought to do with your bedroom if it is not already thus arranged. Finally, in order to ensure freedom from depressed moods, the habit should be formed of sidetracking unpleasant thoughts whenever they occur. Moods not only give rise to unpleasant thinking, but may be caused by unpleasant thinking. as Peters reminds us in his Human Conduct. Quote, when association is working in such a way as to bring in a train of ideas of a certain kind, they keep one in a mood which accords with them. If, for example, one keeps thinking about his past misfortunes and about future ones that he anticipates may befall him, this train of thoughts, together with its fringe of congruent associated ideas and feelings, institutes a somber mood which will last as long as the trend of thought continues to run in this direction. So the only way to dispel the mood is to break up that particular system of ideas as the dominant ones in consciousness and replace them with a happier system. This one may be able to do by force of will. One may set to counting one's blessings instead of one's misfortunes, or one may prove his power to succeed and get the renewed self-confidence and optimism which come from success by turning from moody forebodings to vigorous work. End quote. And also, end of chapter. Please do take a minute and hit that like button. And if you would like to get notified of the next video when it comes up, please do subscribe. Let's head on now to the next video as we continue with this book titled Self-Development, A Handbook for the Ambitious.